Today, there are 6 species of kangaroos across Australia and New Guinea, and they all belong to the marsupial family, who are known for carrying their young in pouches. Kangaroos give birth after just a month of pregnancy, and their young are among the largest and most developed of any marsupial, despite the fact that they're still blind, furless, barely able to move, and weigh less than 2 pounds or less than 1 kilogram. Once they're born, they crawl into their mother's pouch, where they spend another 6 months feeding off her milk and finishing their growth. Once they're out of the pouch, they become what's called young at foot, and that's when the joeys really start developing the skills that make them such formidable fighters and incredibly efficient hoppers. Based on the fossil record, it seems that hopping as a form of locomotion appeared about 20 million years ago. But it wasn't until much more recently that the fastest of the modern species, red kangaroos, appeared. And it's this largest of the kangaroos that scientists have been studying for decades, because hopping is rare among vertebrates. It's used mainly by frogs and small mammals. Nothing else anywhere near the size of a red kangaroo hops, yet these marsupials reach great speeds doing so. In 1973, a group of researchers taught red kangaroos to hop on a treadmill and wear a mask while doing so in order to measure their oxygen consumption. In most mammals, the faster they run, the higher the energy costs for the body. But the opposite is true for kangaroos. Their energy and oxygen requirements are high when they start hopping, but as they go faster, those aerobic demands don't change. Hopping at speeds of 15 kilometers per hour is much less energy costly for kangaroos than for other mammals of similar sizes, and they can comfortably hop at speeds of 20 to 25 kilometers per hour for quite some time. If they're being chased by predators and really need to sprint, they can attain speeds of 65 to 70 kilometers per hour, which puts them among the fastest land animals in the world. Their speed and energy efficiency are the result of a number of adaptations. First, there's the size of their hind limbs, which are twice as long as their forelimbs. These give them a base from which to spring off of, essentially using a bipedal form of movement. Then there are the tough tendons of their ankles and knees. These elastic bands store energy in a way that doesn't rely exclusively on mechanical muscle movement. But their muscles are impressive too. The skeletal muscle mass of red kangaroos is about 50% of their total body mass, making them among the buffest of mammals. Most large mammals, like humans and cows, only have 35 to 40% of their muscle mass made up of skeletal muscle. And for kangaroos, the majority of that muscle is centered around their pelvis and hind limbs, where they need to generate the spring for their hopping. Kangaroos also have a high density of mitochondria in their muscle, as well as a high level of capillary density and blood volumes. Basically, this means their muscles are supercharged, like those of a racing horse. Lastly, their large tails swing in the opposite direction of their torso, helping them balance out their weight so they don't tip forward. All these characteristics allow kangaroos to outrun most predators and move across wide distances in search of food. Yet, when kangaroos move more slowly, they're downright clumsy looking. And surprisingly, this slow movement requires a lot more energy. Their walking is called pentapedal locomotion, referring to 5 feet, since their tail is used like a 5th leg. Because it's more energetically costly to move this slowly, they don't do it as often. It means they have to be a little more choosy about where they're getting their food from, especially since they eat almost exclusively grass. As we mentioned earlier, kangaroos are basically the Australian version of deer, herbivores who graze on grasses and live in large groups called mobs. But there's one major difference between kangaroos and other grass eaters. Kangaroos aren't ruminants. For animals who feed on grass and leaves, it's difficult for the body to break down so much fiber. Ruminants like cows, sheep, and deer have 4 stomach compartments and will regurgitate food in order to chew it a second time, a process known as rumination. Kangaroos eat an equally fibrous diet, but their stomach has only 2 chambers, and they don't chew their cud. In kangaroos, the two parts of the stomach are the sacciform at the front and the tubiform at the back. Food moves along this system almost like a conveyor belt, rather than being stirred over and over again. Because food takes a long time to move through the digestive system of ruminants, they have to eat in smaller bursts, whereas kangaroos can eat more at one time. Kangaroos spend up to 10 hours a day feeding, and their food is such an important source of moisture that they can go days and even weeks without water, as long as they're still eating. Another significant difference between the digestion of kangaroos and ruminants is how the fermentation process works. In order to extract nutrients from all those high-fiber greens, bacteria in these animals' digestive systems help break down the food. For ruminants, the hydrogen gas produced in this process is converted to methane by bacteria, which the animals then burp or fart out. Methane is a greenhouse gas that's 30 times more potent than carbon dioxide, and 50 to 60% of it comes from the agricultural sector and the digestion of ruminating animals. Since people like eating meat so much, this is a major problem, and scientists have been experimenting with ways to get the animals burping less dangerous gases, which is what led them to study kangaroos, whose digestive fermentation process doesn't release nearly as much methane, about 27% the amount of ruminants. Remember, if you do run into them in the wild, it's best to keep your distance. If you're really determined to get up close and personal with a marsupial, it's probably better to go for a wallaby.